when I walk to the ice bath, for me, it's like the best training for a walkout. For walking out to a fight.
Why?
Yeah, so when I walk to the ice bath, I get the same nerves, same feelings as I would to walk out to a cage.
Interesting.
I got addicted to confronting that. Just doing it first thing in the morning. Let me confront the worst possible feeling as a fighter, in my experience, I could ever experience. So I got addicted to doing that. And for me, like mentally, that completely like changed my perspective of like the walkout and the fight, because I've done it so many times.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've done it countless times in my camp leading up to the fight, and when it came time to walking out, it was like, oh, I've been here a million times. So doing that difficult thing, whatever scares you the most,
Mm-hmm.
like facing that head on can be immensely powerful when it comes to your mentality and what you think scares you.
Wow. Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. And today I have a very special guest. He is a professional MMA fighter, a longtime jiu-jitsu competitor, as well as a jiu-jitsu black belt. And I just found out today, an aspiring photographer. My friend, Jean-Paul Lebosnoyani.
Yep.
Ooh, I got it right.
Got it.
I got it right.
Got it.
What's going on, bro?
Nothing much, bro. Blessed to be here. I'd say this is like my first real podcast. So,
Really? The first one?
Yeah, like first, I mean, in my opinion, like very legitimate one. You got
Okay.
an awesome setup here. So blessed to be here.
Well, it's good to have you, man. I'm excited to get into this conversation. As I do with the people who come on the podcast, even though I know you,
Yeah.
I'm like, let me do my Googles. Let me do some research. And I found out that you were like a child prodigy. Like you were competing in jiu-jitsu at what, like 11? Probably maybe even before that. Just competing. Obviously your father is a black belt. He's been your instructor pretty much your whole life. So we're getting into that too. But talk to me about how you started martial arts.
Yeah. So it's pretty crazy, my journey with martial arts, because it was never really something that I remember starting. My dad, he grew up in martial arts in Hapkido and then eventually into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with the Gracie family.
Mm.
So from a young age, he basically had this master plan that, you know, I'm going to be like this next big thing. So there was never really like a starting point for me.
Mm.
So I think there's like some pros and cons to that. But ultimately, you know, it started in, you know, my house as a kid, just kind of punching and kicking my dad's hands, and then eventually moved to the mats. And I really I built a passion for it over time, but I started competing in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu when I was 5 years old, was my first competition. And then basically he was driving the car and I was just a passenger going to all these tournaments. And, you know, I didn't really begin to love it until, you know, later on in my life. Mm-hmm. But it was something that, you know, I was kind of forced to do. And I'm grateful for it now because obviously I have like a head start on a lot of people. But yeah, it's something that's been ingrained in my blood since I was a kid, for sure.
So you started with jiu-jitsu, right?
Yeah. Okay. Jiu-jitsu was my foundation, but my dad always like sprinkled in some striking, some kickboxing, some kali, like a little bit of everything. So there was never a point where like I felt something was extremely new to me. I had a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
But obviously, you know, still learning as time goes on.
Something that I saw while I was reading was that you were training at Wildcard when you were like 11.
Yeah, it was nothing that I like was there consistently doing,
yeah.
But there was a period of time where I was training there for boxing. Yeah.
I wanna think about how I even asked this question, because I think for a lot of people like myself, especially me, like I grew up on the East Coast, we didn't have that many opportunities to work with people or gyms of that magnitude.
Yeah.
Did you understand at that age like the level of access that you had to people like Wildcard and Freddie Roach?
Yeah, I think obviously if you know boxing, you know Freddie Roach is like a legend. Mm-hmm. So even at a young age, like I knew that going into it. But at the same time, like growing up in California, like we're just so privileged in so many different ways with martial arts and with boxing and all these like different things that, yeah, I mean, you kind of take it for granted if you know, hear from somebody from, let's say, like the Midwest or, you know, the other side of the world. You know, it's like, oh my God, like, you know, you train with the Gracies? And I'm like, yeah, of course.
That's a normal
like,
day
you know, that's a normal day. So I think it's important to take a moment and like realize, you know, how lucky we are to train. And I think at a young age, it was cool to be in that environment. You know, obviously growing up in a jiu-jitsu environment, a boxing environment, it's very different. So I remember, seeing some boxers getting their hands wrapped, and I was like, wow, what's that?
Yeah.
So that was really cool. And obviously the level of boxers there were on a different
Oh,
planet
yeah.
from what I was used to. So it definitely put things into perspective for me at that age. But yeah, it was definitely something that I'll never forget for sure.
Was that around the time that you had just started striking, or were you already doing a little bit before? That was the first
Yeah,
time?
I mean, like I said, I kind of always did a little bit of something, but jiu-jitsu was like the focus because my dad, he wanted me to have that foundation of jiu-jitsu to build off of, because ultimately every fight ends on the ground, so when it hits the fan, like you want to be able to feel comfortable on the ground. It was at a point where I first started kind of like my spark for striking was kind of ignited. Obviously over time that kind of built for me for sure.
Now, obviously, we've mentioned your dad a lot in this. How important do you think that it was? Two-part question, actually. One, how important was it to have a father that was pushing you into martial arts? But also, how annoying was that? Because I'm sure it's a 24/7 thing because you're in the house, you're with him in the gym. So how was that? And we'll talk about the good side of it first.
All right, the good stuff first. Well, I think in the moment, when you have a father figure who's like super hard on you as a young kid, it's hard to see the good.
Yeah.
I think all I wanted to do was make him happy as a kid. It didn't really matter what I wanted. I just wanted to make him happy, and that's a very dangerous fuel to like burn. Present day, I try to find things that fuel me like that, like they did when I was a kid. So I don't think I was able to see the good until I matured a little bit. But if I were to do it again, I wouldn't change anything. And I think with my kids, whether it's fighting or whether it's something else, like I definitely want to, be on them about something, so that way they have something to identify with later, and ultimately they can make a choice later in life if they want to stick with it. But I think the fact that he made me do very hard things at a young age definitely shaped my character and in fighting and outside of fighting. So I'm definitely grateful for that sort of upbringing in hindsight.
And then having that same coach day in and day out at home.
No, it's tough because I think when someone has control of your home life, and then you have to have that respect on the mat, and then they also have like your managerial sort of control as well. It got to a point where I kind of wanted to be my own person, and so I had to like take that step away, and I went on my separate way for 2.5 years. I didn't speak to my dad, and that's kind of when I found myself. But there was a lot of buildup before that happened,
Sure.
But I think it's necessary, and in the realm of like nature, and obviously like I associate myself with like lions and like that mentality of a lion, and I think in a pride of lions, like in a lion pack, when there's a young cub that reaches a certain age, the lion king and the lion cub, they're gonna start butting heads, because ultimately like the lion king's territory, that's his. If a little lion cub thinks he's going to start, marking territory, it's like, nah, you got to go find your own territory. And that's kind of what I did. And I think that's made me who I am today.
I agree with that 100%. And I think for a lot of people, especially when you have parents that are hard on you all the time, I had the same conversation with my mom about how hard she was on me, because when I was younger, my father passed, so it was just her. And then it's like, she has to be the one that's on me doing all these things. And so for a long time, while I was still living in DC, we were having that same issue where I'm like, we're butting heads all the time. And it wasn't until I left and came to California, took some space, and now like it's like our relationship is better than it ever was. But I think, like you said, you needed to leave to find yourself, see like who you are, kind of struggle a little bit on your own, figure out stuff on your own, almost like become a man. And then when you come back, it's like, I'm a different person now. I'm my own person now. So I'm meeting you as a different person, and not just your son, but an adult.
And I think it also gives you the perspective of also appreciating who they are.
Absolutely.
Because when you're with someone 24/7, you kind of take them for granted.
Absolutely.
And what they've accomplished. So taking that step back definitely also made me respect my dad a lot more than I did before I had left, you know?
Speaking of lions, I also found out another interesting fact. So for as long as I've known you, your nickname was
Mufasa. Yeah, the Lion King.
Exactly. Yeah. But then I saw that your nickname before was the Lifeguard.
It's true. Yeah,
the Lifeguard. Okay, so tell me a little bit about that.
So obviously, like Cali boy, growing up by the beach, in the summertime, I would do this thing called junior lifeguards. I mean, it wasn't like a beach camp. I took it seriously. I took it seriously. Like you think lifeguard, like kiddie pool lifeguard. No. This is like ocean, right?
Okay.
Waves, Mother Nature. You don't
Very
mess
different.
around. So I took it very seriously, and I would do it every summer, and it was like a great cross training for fighting.
Oh,
like
yeah,
for
sure.
I would consider it part of my conditioning because they would have us do these like crazy buoy swims, running, swimming, like paddling. And it was something that I was also very passionate about, having the contradiction of like knowing how to kill someone, but also knowing how to save someone. Yeah. So ultimately, that's how that nickname came into play.
Who gave you that nickname?
It was something on YouTube or online or something like that.
Some random person.
Some random person. But how it came up was I was in Paris with my dad and my sister. So my dad and my sister and I would basically travel the world competing in mainly like Nagas, a couple IBJJFs, and some other tournaments as well. But like Naga was like basically my proving ground. So I was doing an adult division. I was like, I don't know, maybe 13, 14 years old, doing an adult division. And I would like put people to sleep with guillotines. Like people in Nagas sometimes you see some crazy things going on. People don't tap.
Crazy one, yeah.
You're seeing legs break. But
I feel like Naga, I don't know if you knew about US grappling also, but those are like the two ones on the East Coast for us. They're like, you never know what you're gonna get.
Yeah, you never know what you're gonna get. You might get like world-class competitors, or you might get some guy like, I don't know, doing like cartwheels or something.
Exactly.
You never know. So ultimately I would choke these people out, and then I would instantly like get up, and you can find this on YouTube. I would like lift their legs before the ref even kind of knew what was going on. That's where the like Lifeguard nickname came out. I'd put him to sleep and then bring him back to life. I know it doesn't like sound good.
That's hilarious though. When I looked at it, I was like, oh, that's funny. But now that I have the context behind it, I'm like, okay, that makes a lot of sense.
That's pretty random.
For sure. For sure. Because I was like, that must be a typo. It's still on, I think it's SureDog that's still on it like that. Yeah.
I don't know what. I think it was SureDog.
Okay.
That's what it was. But I'm pretty sure it's still there. And then it says like something like Kung Fu or like, that's not my background.
Obviously you grew up here in California. Yeah. You were wrestling. Did you wrestle all 4 years in high school? Okay.
Yeah, I wrestled.
Maricosta?
Yeah.
Okay.
I wrestled. My dad, he had me wrestle with a private coach 2 years before. And then I wrestled for 4 years.
That's so fucking genius.
Costa. Yeah. He was smart. You know, like I got to give it to him.
Yeah.
I got to give it to him. He did a lot of things right for me.
Because you got to catch up to those kids that have been wrestling.
Yeah.
Way before.
Yeah, because jiu-jitsu and wrestling are very different things.
Very different.
It was an interesting experience because I think with jiu-jitsu and with grappling, it was always like, I was always good at it, especially at a young age. It was something that came very natural to me. And then wrestling came into play. And I think, me personally, the best way to describe wrestling is jiu-jitsu with handcuffs on. You're just getting like baited with all these things you can't do. This neck is right here.
I know.
I want to choke you and I can't choke you. So that was tough transition for me. But I don't think it was until my senior year where I started to use my jiu-jitsu to get me far in wrestling.
In the ways that you could use it.
Yeah. I wasn't a huge fan of it. Like, I wasn't super passionate about wrestling. Okay. No. Because my love and understanding for jiu-jitsu was so high that I was also like a kid. I wasn't able to like see that side of wrestling.
It felt like a handicap.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. But towards my senior year, I was able to start just connecting things instead of separating wrestling and jiu-jitsu and just kind of making it grappling, Then stuff started to really make sense for me. Another experience that I was super grateful to have and to add to my resume for MMA as well.
Was there anything in that time where you were more focused on wrestling? Something that I do in jiu-jitsu really works well in wrestling and other people are not privy to it. What
100%.
was that thing?
I think it was riding legs, leg rides. Basically, like if someone's on like a bottom position and you're behind them, throwing your legs in, almost like throwing hooks in, and then triangling your own legs and using that as like a fulcrum point to turn them over and tilt them. I have to give credit to my wrestling coaches because they also had like a background in jiu-jitsu. So they understood me. And thankfully to them, they kind of helped make it sense to me. You know, they were like, instead of trying to teach this kid how to like throw in a half and turn somebody, like let's use what he already knows to benefit him. And I think that was definitely a big switch. Riding legs for sure.
Listening to you talk about that switch from being very jiu-jitsu focused to more wrestling. Initially, I started with Muay Thai and then I started jiu-jitsu. Actually, on my 18th birthday, I started jiu-jitsu. When I transitioned into MMA, for a long time, my brain was still jiu-jitsu oriented. I wasn't really doing any wrestling at the time. So anybody would shoot on me and it's like Guillotine City. And I was catching a lot of people. And then all of a sudden, I wasn't catching anyone anymore. But I would still try it. And then I remember in certain fights that I had where I would fight wrestlers, I would try the guillotine and it would never work. And I'm like, okay, well, now I have to figure out something because every time I go for this guillotine, I'm getting taken down. And then started training wrestling specifically in San Diego. I was working with J-Flow, Justin Flores. We started working on defending the takedowns and it slowly started to remove that natural reaction that I have of going for the guillotines. And now it's like my automatic reaction in a lot of different scenarios, not just off of takedowns, but just certain scenarios where I would be with people who have wrestled before, where I would do jiu-jitsu things and they wouldn't work. That was kind of a pivotal moment for me to understand where and when you can use jiu-jitsu and then where and when you can use wrestling. But the leg ride is a good one.
Just to touch on that, I've felt the same exact thing that you just described.
About the
like with Pete, It still doesn't fully like make sense to me because there was a period of time where they were like goated. Neck magnet, just boom, boom. And then something just changed, but
probably from white belt up until purple belt, guillotine City on everybody. And then all of a sudden purple belt is like no more. You gotta work for that fucking guillotine now. And then obviously you got people like Brian who can fucking find a way to make that shit work regardless. Speaking of Brian, we've both trained with him. I know you've trained with him much longer than I have. Were you training with him when you were like a kid?
I met Brian when I was 16.
By the way, we're talking about Brian Ortega. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I met Brian when I was 16 at the Gracie Academy. He's definitely one of the only people that I've experienced in MMA that has like really taken me under his wing. And so I have to give a lot of respect to him for helping evolve my game. You know, that period of time where I wasn't with my dad, Brian was there, you know, really kind of showing me how to become my own man when it comes to MMA and outside of that. Like I had my pro debut with Brian in my corner, you know, doing multiple camps with him for his fights and vice versa. So yeah, he's, as you know, one of a kind dude.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about your transition into MMA. Was it a gradual transition? Were you like doing amateur fights and still doing jiu-jitsu, or was it just like once you decided MMA, you were all in?
There was a gradual transition when it comes to jiu-jitsu to MMA, but I feel like it was through my amateur fights and even my pro fights that I started to transition fully to MMA. For a while, it was still jiu-jitsu that was winning me fights and that was keeping me winning. Heavy emphasis on striking and kickboxing because that was what I was lacking. You know, I still don't think I've been able to like show my striking fully in a fight. Even now, I'm still making that transition, you know? And I think that's super cool because I don't think that the best version of myself has been like completed yet. Personally, I love that because there's so much like more to find out about myself.
Was it you who decided I want to fight MMA, or was it more of your father who was like, I would like for you to fight MMA?
Yeah, that's a good question. I remember there was pancreation fighting.
Yes.
And I remember I was like between like 16 and 17, my dad was like, tell me when, you know, like we'll get you in there, pancreation.
Yeah.
And to me, it was like kind of scary, you know, like jiu-jitsu, I felt like I knew what I was doing, but I was like, nah, I'll just wait until I'm 18, you know, and then I'll fight for real, you know, and then 18 came around and I was like, all right, like we got to do this. Like we got to fight. That was when that transition happened. When I turned 18 and it was like, okay, now I can legally fight as an amateur with everything, you know, not just like body strikes or slaps or whatever. So yeah, when I turned 18 was that initial transition.
So you had your first amateur fight when you were 18?
Yeah, I was still in high school, which was kind of cool.
Oh, I know that.
Yeah,
I know. That's something I actually want to talk to you about, because I also was fighting when I was in school too. How was that duality, like living that life of being a combat sports athlete, not just any athlete? It's not like you're just a football player, because the football players are cool, but it's very different when you have a football player right here, a basketball player right here, and then someone who tells you they fight. You know what I mean? What was that like at school when people knew that you were like the jiu-jitsu guy or the MMA guy?
That's a very multifaceted question, so I don't know which way to go about it. But
let's start with how you felt.
I was extremely motivated by my friends to fight because I just wanted to be cool.
Fair. As like a 16-year-old kid, 17-year-old
all honesty,
kid.
All honesty on the table, like, because a lot of like my teachers, some of my best friends, like some kids I wasn't that close with, like they would all come to my fights too, which was awesome. Like my principal was at one of my fights. So that was really cool, and it was extremely motivating as well. And one of the coolest things looking back on it was everybody understood where I wanted my life to go. There was no question. I was not going to go to college. I wasn't going to like pursue an academic career in any way. They not only supported that, but like sometimes in the classroom, they would give me a pass sometimes. They'd be like, he's not going to college. You know, like I was definitely, I took school seriously, but there wasn't that pressure that I had to go to college because it was so apparent of where I wanted to go. And they were super respectful of that. So I think that was also cool about, you know, being a fighter in high school.
Of course, doing something as amazing and interesting as being a fighter comes a lot of attention too. How did the other guys in school feel about that? And did anybody ever like try you? Which I'm sure they did, because we're all fucking dumb men, right? And then the second thing is, how did the girls feel about it, and what was that experience like? Because I'm sure, again, it's like you're the coolest fucking person in school because you're fighting. So
yeah, being a fighter, I think obviously you understand this as well, but people do want to test you, especially if there's alcohol involved. You know, it's everybody just feels like they're Superman, you know? So I definitely learned my lessons in terms of fighting for free. That's not something I'm doing going forward.
Going forward.
You got to pay me. You got to pay me. You got to pay me at least, you know, $1,000.
Yeah.
And then when we get in the UFC, we could up that number. But for right now, that's what we got. But yeah, no more fighting for free. That was something I think that was like necessary as a kid to understand, you know, the Spider-Man quote, like great power, great responsibility, you know, so as a fighter, we need to know that. I think my first like real fight where I got like suspended in school actually ended up being with some of my best friends. Yeah. Shout out Nick and Kit. They're like some of my closest friends, but they would like bully me as a kid. And then ultimately they were like, all right, we want this guy on our side. So let's be nice to him. And then when it comes to like the girls, I've actually thought about this. So since like MMA and like boxing has grown so much, I feel like when I was in school, it wasn't as cool, especially in California. Like wrestling is not like football where it's like, oh, he's a wrestler. It's like, oh, he's wearing a singlet, like wrestling dudes.
Really?
Yeah. I
would have thought that like wrestling out here would have been like the shit.
No, at least not in my opinion.
Okay.
You know, not in my experience, at least in Southern California. Maybe some other schools it was different, but where I grew up, it wasn't. No one was coming to wrestling meets to like watch wrestling other than like my homies, you know?
Just like, unless you're in like Iowa or some shit where it's like the biggest
it's
thing
different there. It's different there. But what I've noticed is like now I can't go anywhere without people talking about fighting, even if it's like has nothing to do with me. It's just like it's the new like football, it's the new basketball, which I think is amazing that the sport is like growing so much in that sense. So I think it would be cooler if, you know, everybody had that mentality when I was still in school. But, you know, to kids that are like starting to train now, I see it, you know, like people are so excited and stoked to be fighters.
I think something that's super interesting about that too, when you talk about wrestling, is when I was younger, I was only doing Muay Thai up until 18, right? People didn't understand what Muay Thai was, so they just called it karate. And it was like an insult. They were like, yeah, this fucking guy does karate guy. Whatever, you know? And, you know, of course they would try you and then fighting all the time. I fought so much in school, dude. I almost didn't graduate 8th grade because I got suspended so much. But I never started any of these fights. I'm sure you can understand that. It's always like people trying to. Yeah, that's very interesting. So the girls didn't care.
I don't think so. At least I didn't see it that way. I'm
sure they care. I'm sure they care now.
I feel like now it might be a little different. But
I'm sure they care. By the way, he's a taken man, so any girls that are thinking about it, don't even try. When you were doing amateur fights, was there ever a point where you were like, I don't know if I want to do this. Maybe I want to just do jiu-jitsu? Or was it always like once you started MMA fighting, you were like, yeah, I'm this is it?
It wasn't until my first loss that I felt that way.
Okay.
That was tough because I had my first loss and then COVID hit. So there was
so
no
that's
like
it. Yeah.
avenging it. You know, there's no avenging it. It was a lot of like finding out, you know, who I am. I have to give props to you, you know, and to our mental coach, Caleb,
Yes.
that kind of got me out of that hole. But yeah, that was tough because after that first loss, it was like I was training my garage. I was like putting mats down, you know, having friends come over and train, lifting weights. Like there was no like, there's no foreseeable time to avenge my loss.
Exactly.
Because
we didn't know
COVID.
what was
We
going
didn't
on.
know.
Yeah.
So that was a tough time. That was probably the first time where I was kind of like, is this what I want to do? You know, like, am I even good at this? Like, is this, the love for fighting was like a question mark. And luckily now I'm in a very different place.
Yeah.
But that took a lot of work to now be where I'm at now.
Before we started the podcast, I stopped us from talking about it. And we were talking about podcasting, sitting in front of a camera, that just being anxiety inducing. And then you asked me if it was worse than fighting.
Yeah.
And we both kind of had the same reaction where I was like, my last fight, I actually was a little bit too comfortable. And you said the same thing. So I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, it was definitely a weird experience because normally I do get nervous before a fight. And, you know, you hear people say like nerves are good, you know, they keep you sharp. But I felt like I did so much preparation, like mental work, building up for it, like visualization, and also that like sense of, no, this is like what I'm built for. I was born for this. Like this is normal for me to feel normal. But in that present moment, it was so strange to be fighting for a world title and being like, why am I not nervous? Feels like a normal Friday night. In the moment, it's hard to differentiate whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. You know, in hindsight, it's hard to pinpoint whether or not that feeling was a determining factor of the outcome. I don't think I'll ever really know that.
Right.
But I think looking back on it, like I can kind of like relax into the fact that in those like crazy moments where, you know, everything's on the line, there is some truth to like, I am born for this, I am built for this. And when you prepare for something, not to be surprised that, you know, you're ready for what you prepared for. But I guess I won't find that out until my next fight. Yeah, I think as a fighter, it's one of the most extreme things you can humanly do. So, and everybody's journey is different. So I think like as you go through it, you're learning. It's all a learning experience. So I guess I'll need to have a little more contrast to really be able to analyze like why I felt the way I felt. But it was weird. It was weird.
You know what's funny? Before my last fight, I was having the same thoughts. Normally, I do get nervous, right?
Yeah.
And then I'm just like, I'm not nervous. Not only was it my last fight, but it was the one before that. And I remember Caleb called me, and I wasn't doing any sessions with him or anything. He just called to check in. He's like, yeah, I know you're fighting next week, but I'll just, you know, how are you feeling? And I was like, I feel weird because I'm not nervous. But I'm now nervous about the fact that I don't feel nervous. And I'm like, I don't know what I should be feeling. And he said to me, that's just you not being aware of the change that has happened. Now I'm in a different space. Now I am a little bit more comfortable. Now I am more confident in myself. And I'm not used to being in that space because when you're in that space, you're also not as anxious or nervous or any of that stuff, right? And because of that, it's a new feeling. It's not like you're going to a job interview. You're about to go fist fight somebody else. A drastic change like that can kind of mess up your thought process and make you think that something's wrong when in reality, this is you as the most confident, you've prepared. Like you said, you've prepared, you're built for this. Why don't I feel nervous right now when I have before? In a way, I felt that in different areas of my life. And sometimes it kind of feels like imposter syndrome almost.
Yeah.
At one point, I had almost like my dream job, getting paid 6 figures. And I'm like, 2 days before I start, I'm like, do I even deserve this? Like, you know, am I even worthy of having this? But it took me having some conversations for people to tell me like, yo, you've done all the things to get to, it's not like someone just gave you this opportunity. Like you worked your ass off for this opportunity. You've studied the things, you've done the different projects, you've done everything you needed to do to be in that position. So don't feel like you don't deserve it or questioning if you should be here or not. You did what you were supposed to do. You earned it. Go do what you're supposed to do.
Yeah. It's a constant like journey of acknowledging what you've done and not forgetting what you've done.
But also not letting it make you big-headed.
Right.
Either.
But the thing is, I think that's a certain type of person. You know, I think everybody's different, right?
Sure.
Everybody's different. But me personally, like my insecurities keep me humble, keep me grounded, you know?
Yeah.
So regardless of how big my head wants to get, deep down, like I still have things that keep me humble and keep me hungry for what I want in that sense. So it's a trip.
It's definitely a trip.
Yeah, it's a trip.
Do you have a thing that you say to yourself in those moments of weakness or perceived weakness, right? And I'll tell you what mine is. Like I'm sure you've done this exercise where you have like heavy ass dumbbells in your hand or like plates or something, and you're trying to work on your grip, and you're just walking and trying to hold it for as long as you can. I'm walking, and I felt my arms trying to give out, and I literally just kept telling myself, "Don't be a bitch, don't be a bitch, don't be a bitch." And it sounds crazy, and it sounds like if I said it out loud, it's like, dude, why are you talking to yourself like that? But like for me, that's how I talk to myself. So I'm straining and I'm like, nope, you can't be a bitch right now. Dude, every time I did that, just for me saying that, I added a minute.
Yeah.
Every time. When we have these, I don't want to call it a mantra, but like just this phrase that we say to ourselves to kind of just like get ourselves to focus. Do you have one of those?
Yeah. So the crazy thing is like, that's one of them. 100%. 100%.
You're telling yourself, don't be a bitch.
Don't be a bitch. I think the first time I heard it was with Brian. One of his buddies is a frogman, which is like, it's like a Navy SEAL type. Okay. I don't know the specifications, but like a very serious person. Yeah. And he would say that. He'd be like, whenever you're scared of something, like we tell our guys, like the frogmen, they would say like, fuck it, don't be a bitch and just go. And that always stuck with me. And I started getting into like taking ice baths and stuff. And I got like one of those horse troughs, like the metal ones. And I wrote on the trough in Sharpie, don't be a bitch. So every time I walk up to it, I'm like, all right, don't be a bitch.
You got to do it.
And it works.
It does work.
Like I wish there was one that sounded better, but that one, it just works. It has power. It has power. Yeah. Yeah, I would say that's first place. Yeah. And then another one that I'll cycle is like I was born for this. Okay. And that's like a more serious one. That is a good for me. One. Yeah. But I still think that one works better. That one works better.
Don't be a bitch. It works, bro.
Because you don't want to be one.
And it's so simple. It's just a few words. Yeah. Don't be a bitch.
It's self-explanatory. You don't need more than that. You don't need more than that.
How does it change your mind when you're in that? Because I think a lot of people, they think that we don't have that, right? That we're just like all disciplined 24/7 and we never break. We never feel like we don't want to do anything, but it happens. For me, it happens damn near weekly.
Yeah,
like,
that's, as you know, something that's always that I have to deal with. And I think as I mature as a person and as a fighter, one thing that has been very apparent is to have balance. Knowing that like, and it's very hard because at least me personally, like a lot of my confidence comes from my work ethic. Yes. You know, I don't inherently just believe that I'm great at what I do. It comes from, no, I train my ass off and that's going to give me the edge. So lately it's been like, okay, I still want that mentality of like work, work, work. But if I show up to work like half of me, you know, depleted or run down, or if I'm always run down 24/7, how is that going to benefit me in a fight or in a camp? And having contrast between maintenance training and training camp, you know, I feel like most of my life I'm just always in training camp. There's no contrast. Yeah. So that you can burn out there pretty easily. So I'll have like a conversation with myself. I'll ask myself, you know, like, do I want to train? And if the answer is yes, I'll whip out my phone. And I have a trusty little coin flip. So I'll flip a coin and you have to honor the coin. So if it's heads, I go to training, tails, I stay home and rest. You flip that coin, no matter what it is, you have to do it.
Interesting.
Because if you take away the power of the coin, then what are you doing?
Exactly. Because then you're just making up your own rules.
So that's been something that like has really helped me. You know, and if the answer is no right off the bat, you also have to respect that. Yeah. Because there's been times where I show up to the gym and if I'm not loving what I do, if I'm not loving the training, like I'm not really doing what I want to be doing. And I think there's also that side of it of like, I think Mike Tyson said like,
be disciplined to do what you hate to do, but do it like you love it.
And for me personally, like that's not a question for me.
Mhm.
You know, like it's a love-hate relationship with what I do, and I'm
Yeah.
always going to do it. I'm
Yeah.
not cutting any corners. It's a matter of how can I do this in a way where I can be the best version of myself when it matters.
Yeah.
And how can I live a happy and full life while still pushing myself?
Mhm.
And for me, coin, app, flip, because you don't always have a coin on you.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you always have your phone on you. So that's been working for me.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
I've never thought about a coin.
But you got to respect the power of the coin.
Yeah. So if it says don't go to practice, you don't go. But if
no.
it says go,
You go.
You got to get up and go.
Yeah, you got to carry the boats.
Wow. That's a good one. I like that. So kind of sticking on the mental side of training and competing, people ask me all the time about pre-fight nerves, and my number one answer whenever anyone says any of this to me is go train harder. Because I've found for myself personally, and I'm not gonna act like I just made that up. It actually came from GSP's book. I don't know if you ever read it, The Way of the Fight. Fucking amazing. Anybody who please just go read that. It's like one of the greatest books ever fucking written for combat sports.
Do they have an audiobook version?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. But I know they have the digital, and then you can buy like the physical copy. I like the physical copy of books, so I respect it though. I'm not mad at that. Guy. It's better because it's almost like a podcast. My only issue with audiobooks is unless it's the actual person's voice, it's kind of hard for me to stay with it because it's just one person talking for an extended period of time, and there's no like give and take, you know. But in the book, he talks about gaining mental strength from training. And he's like, when he first signs the contract, I know that between now and the day of the fight, I need to put so much fucking work in that by the time I get to the end, I know I've done every single thing possible to win this fight. He's like, I know that the outcome is not in my control.
Yeah.
Like, we could go in there and fucking be jumping up and down and before the fight starts and fuck up, you never know what can happen, right? But he's like, I just want to make sure that prior to the fight, I put as many cards in my deck, as many chips on my side as possible, so that when I go out there, there's more likely a chance of me winning the fight, how I see myself winning the fight. I'll tell you right now, and this might have been the reason why I felt so calm in the last fight, is because I literally did fucking everything.
Same.
Dude, there was days where I did not want to run. Yeah. But I put that fucking sauna suit on and I ran. Yep. There was days I did not want to wake up to go to, dude, you know that morning when you wake up in the morning, you got to go to training and it's like a Thursday and you've been crushing yourself all week and you wake up and you try to turn over and your shoulder hurts and your back hurts and your legs are sore and you got to have that conversation with yourself in the bed and you're like, do I need to go to practice right now? Yes, I have a fight in 2 weeks. Well, I got to get up. I got to go. And doing that and forcing yourself to do those things builds so much fucking confidence. I don't think people understand. And so when they like do what you said, where they're like, oh, well, maybe they do have the coin flip, but they don't honor it. And like, yeah, I'll do it. And then it says, go to the gym. And they're like, but I got to do this. I got to do that. Don't do it. Because then what ends up happening is you get to the fight and right before you step into the cage, you start, or when they're doing the announcements, you're thinking, man, I didn't run that day. Man, I didn't lift this day. Man, I didn't go to that wrestling practice. I didn't go to that striking practice. I didn't do these things. And it kind of like pulls away from the confidence. And the more you do, the more you keep the confidence. The less you do, the more it takes away. Dude, that book changed my whole perspective on that.
I definitely have to check that out.
Fucking great.
Especially, like, I'm a big GSP fan, of course. It's hard not to be.
It's hard not to be.
But I think it's important to also differentiate between, like, camp and out of camp.
For sure. Yeah. There's a difference.
In camp, I'm
excuses.
not whipping out the corner. But that's why it's important to have the contrast between non-camp training and camp training. Because there was a period of time where I was like, I didn't know if I was going to fight next week or if I was going to fight in 3 months. Yeah. So I was just always ready. Yeah. And so that coin flip would kind of help me just keep going. But yeah, like you said, the main reason why I felt so confident is because I'm the same way. If there's one little thing that I didn't do, or
it's going to eat at you.
If it's even like a little sweet.
Yeah.
You know, a little chocolate here, like it doesn't matter. You sign that contract, it's like a switch flips and it's easy. It's effortless to like do everything right, because if I win, I want to know why. If I lose, I don't want to be like, oh, yep, that's the reason right there.
Oh, because I ate this sweet or I didn't go to this practice, right? Yeah.
Yep. So I'm right there with you on that.
You were talking about maintenance training versus in camp. Caleb was the one who brought that to my attention, actually, because I've been training my whole life. So I only know go to the gym every day. Yeah. Right? One of my first sessions with him, he asked me like, what's your training schedule like? And I'm like, oh, I train, twice a day. I go this time and then I go in the afternoon. And this is like not in camp. I'm like, no. He's like, okay. So what do you do in camp? I was like, oh, well, I basically do the same thing. I just add like more strength and conditioning. And then he's like, dude, what? Like what? What are you doing? He's like, he works with a lot of professional athletes. He's like, 90% of the fighters they don't do
They're not doing that.
They're not doing that.
They're not doing.
And I'm like, I mean, they can live like that. This is my life.
Yeah.
What should I do? He's like, take some sessions off. And I'm like, okay. But then this is my thought process behind it. I've had this since like the day that I decided I wanted to fight. If I'm not training, somebody else is getting better.
You're speaking for both of us right now. You're speaking for both of us.
The other person that I could potentially fight is getting better. I need to be able to keep up with them, so I have to be training.
Yeah.
And so he's like, I get that, but like, when do you rest? I was like, I don't know, man. Like, even now, like, I'm still not that great at recovery. And I think for a long time, I actually need to focus on recovery, because when I was younger, dude, I didn't give up. Dude, I was like going to training every day.
Yeah.
Like, sore, don't matter, still going. But now it's like, oh, if I do that enough, something's going to start hurting and I might end up fucking myself up, you know? But you were saying we're speaking for both of us.
Nah, yeah, 100%. I literally feel the exact same way.
Yeah.
When you're explaining that, I'm like, I'll just let you talk because I'm going to say the same shit.
Yeah.
But I'm starting to see now that because we have that mindset. Not everybody has that mindset.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, because we have that mindset, I think it's okay for us to try to be better at resting because the effort that it takes to rest is just as hard as training.
Oh yeah.
For us.
Yeah.
You know, like taking a rest day is like just dealing with the mental things that come up. Like, like what are you doing, bro? What are you doing? You're like resting on the couch right now. Everybody's training. Like that in itself, even though it's like it doesn't make sense to me, but like you have to do that. And you know, I've experienced it where like if I do take a rest day or if I do prioritize, you know, recovery, the following training is better than what it would have been, you know, if I just pushed the day before. So I think it's like it's kind of like driving a car, like a race car. Like you have your foot on the gas pedal, and if you're constantly just flooring it, you're not going to finish the track. You know, you have to be able to take your foot off at the right time, hit the brakes at the right time in order to make it around, you know, the race with the fuel that you have. Yeah. You know, you got to stop and refuel at some point. But at the same time, I'm like, forget all that. Like, I don't care. Like, I'm gonna be the fastest until I run out of gas. You know, so it's tough. It's a battle.
It is. Switching gears off of this now, I mentioned in the beginning that you're an aspiring professional photographer now.
I don't know about professional. definitely a passion of mine for sure.
Is that new, or is that something you've kind of messed around with your whole life? And
yeah, I would say it's something that's always kind of been there for me, at least in like my 20s. But I think where it stems from for me is like because I had such a tough childhood, and I mean, obviously, you know, everybody has a tough childhood, but for me personally, like I don't have like a lot of memories of my childhood. You know, they were blocked out by like, you know, me wanting to be the best in the world and, you know, focusing on the tournament every weekend. Like there was a lot that just kind of got like blocked out, you know, or filed away somewhere that I can't really reach it. So for me, taking photos is a way for me to create memories that I can look back on regardless of what my mind chooses to remember or not. Yeah. So that's really where like my passion for photography comes, is like I just want to take pictures of like my life, the experiences that I have, my friends, my family, be able to like one day, you know, look back and be like, oh, I remember that, you know, because I don't have a lot of that from my childhood, and it is what it is. But, you know, I kind of reached a point where I was like, you know what, like starting now, like I'm going to remember everything or most things that are important to me. Yeah.
That's a very good reason.
I encourage everybody. Like I try to get all my friends to like either, you know, get a little film camera or, you know, I mean, we all have phones, but, you know, there's something about having like a tool camera, specifically for taking photos and making memories. And, you know, you start to like see things like in the parking lot, you know, you pointed out, you know, the sunset and those palm trees. And I looked over and I was like, oh yeah, that's like a perfect photo right there. You know, it's take a second and take it in. So that's definitely something that, you know, outside of fighting that I definitely like, it kind of grounds me.
Do you think once you're done fighting, that's probably something you're going to do a little bit more photography?
I think not, at least right now, not in any kind of professional way.
Sure.
I think it's something that I will always have a passion for, you know, something that will keep me like, you know, switched on and trying to get better at. And like the other thing that's really cool is from the beginning when I started taking photos to like where I've gotten now, it's like I can tell that I've gotten a little bit better at it. So seeing that improvement as well. And I'm also like blessed to have a lot of like my close friends being like legitimate professional photographers. Yeah. So I learn a lot from them as well.
Do you have any photographers that you really like, whose work you've seen and you're like, oh yeah, that's sick?
Personally, like one of my good friends, his name's Nicholas Small, and he's been documenting my journey, pretty much my professional career.
Are these the photos, the ones that you post on Instagram and stuff?
Yeah, like those typically the ones from like my fights or like preparing for the fight. So kind of seeing his view of how he kind of tells the story, I think is really cool.
Yeah.
And it's also crazy to think that, you know, I'm going to have those photos to look back on, you know, regardless. And how it makes me feel when he's there taking photos and how I feel when I see them is how I want to make other people feel. You know, like some of my friends that are fighters, you know, I always bring my camera to the fights and try to capture some moments, because as a fighter, unless you're at like a high level, you're not really getting people with cameras on you.
You're not.
You know, maybe one or two like shitty photos from the fight, but no one's really like capturing those moments for you. And knowing how that makes me feel, I'm like, all right, I want to like try to do that for someone. And seeing their reactions to the photos you take is one of my favorite things.
Because they're super grateful for it.
Yeah. And like they wouldn't have it if you didn't decide to capture that moment or whatever.
Yeah.
So
are there any other hobbies that you have outside of photography that you
try to do a little bit of everything? Like I like to ski, I like to play volleyball, I like being in the ocean, spending time outdoors. But as you know, it's very difficult to like have a hobby while you're a fighter, because everything matters when you're a fighter. You know, any time away from fighting, like you said, you know, there could be somebody else that's spending a little more time than you. You know, it's just that's type of mind we have as fighters, where everything matters, but at the same time nothing matters. You know,
I have a phrase that I say, everything and nothing.
So true.
Because like people ask, oh, how's training going, or how's life going? It's like everything and nothing. Everything matters, but also none of it really means shit.
And who knows if they even know what you're talking about.
Yeah. I'm sure they don't, but it's okay.
I do. I know what you're talking about.
Earlier we were talking about don't be a bitch. And you mentioned that you have it written on your ice bath. How long have you been doing ice baths?
I started doing them kind of on my own, where I would just fill up this bucket, this human-sized bucket with ice, and I would go in there, and that's kind of when I first started doing it very inconsistently. I would go in there, hyperventilate, and like my body would like tense up and freeze, and I would have like a panic attack and get out. And ultimately, like I wasn't a bitch, but you know, my body said otherwise. And it wasn't until I started doing ice baths in Denmark, in like the cold winter there, where it's like below zero. And I started meeting with a group of people, and we have kind of like a ice bath bathing club. Where I know that I got it. People from all walks of life. There's photographers, there's rock climbers, designers, all kinds of people, and we all kind of meet, and there's a little culture aspect to it. Jump in the water and then go about our days.
Is that like in the morning?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's early in the morning. And so when I came back to California after doing that, I kind of got addicted to like doing that. You know, it was like doing something really difficult first thing in the morning. So I started doing ice baths at home. Me personally, I don't really see like the recovery aspect of it. Like I'm still sore the next day. You know, I'm still sore. I'm still like hurting. Maybe there's a small percentage of, you know, being a little less sore than not doing it. But ultimately for me, it's like the best training for a walkout, for walking out to a fight.
Interesting. Tell me why.
Yeah. So when I walk to the ice bath, you know, take off your slippers, whatever, that is like, I get the same nerves, same feelings as I would to walk out to a cage.
Interesting.
So I got addicted to confronting that. And then just doing it first thing in the morning, you know, like let me confront the worst possible feeling that as a fighter, in my experience, I could ever experience.
Yeah.
So I got addicted to doing that. And for me, like mentally, that completely like changed my perspective of like the walkout and the fight, because I've done it so many times. You know, I've done it countless times in my camp leading up to the fight. And when it came time to walking out, it was like, oh, I've been here a million times. So doing that difficult thing, whatever scares you the most, like facing that head on can be immensely powerful when it comes to your mentality and what you think scares you.
Wow. That's why you were fucking not
Probably
nervous or anything.
I think,
mentally you did the walk 1,000 times every time you went into that ice bath. Wow.
What the other thing too is like when you make that walk as a fighter, like there's no point where you're just gonna like turn around and
you can't
walk away.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you're locked in. You're locked in until you walk out after it's done. With the ice baths, never deciding, no, I'm not doing this. You know, when
like
you're
once
already,
you made the decision,
you're already in your board shorts. Like you're already like, there's never like a, nah, not today.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to go about my day. It's like, you got to do it.
Do you think that there is a difference between that and like a cold shower?
Not necessarily. Okay. I think because I started with the cold showers.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, like I got addicted to the same kind of thing with the cold showers. Obviously, the ice bath is like way more extreme.
Of course, yeah, it's
but
super cold.
The cold shower, it still does the same thing. I believe, like with your mind. You know, you're still doing something you don't want to do first thing in the morning, and everybody's tolerance is different. So like a cold shower to me now isn't as like scary as it was because obviously the ice bath is like the big scary thing.
Right.
Definitely, you know, you hear it everywhere, but like start with the cold showers, you know, and see how you like that. And then you can gradually step up from there. But from my experience, like just doing whatever scares you, if you can find something that scares you and find a way to do it every day, it takes the power away, you know, it takes the fear away, and it gives you that confidence of knowing that you did it the day before.
Something that we've kind of touched on a few different times in this conversation: do the hard things, do the things that are super difficult, do the things that you don't want to do. It's something that I kind of live by in a way, because if I'm being honest with you, maybe not every good thing, but like most of the good things that have happened in my life have come on the back of me being super anxious or afraid of doing that thing. And then I'm like, fuck it, I'm going to do it. Literally yesterday, as we're recording this is Tuesday, I did the podcast live. I told everybody in the stream while we were talking, I was like me continuing this after Courtney left the show almost did not happen.
Yeah.
Because I was so fucking afraid to just sit in front of a camera and talk with no one else.
Yeah. Part
of the reason why I wanted to do the podcast was because I was like, oh, if I have someone else to talk to, this is easy.
Right.
Like I don't have to think about the cameras. I don't have to think about anything. But when it's just you and the camera, and then I'm doing it live, so there's people sitting there watching, listening to a conversation that I'm having basically with myself. That shit is scary, dude. I remember the first time, like it wasn't until right before the day before, that Sunday, I was sitting there and I was like, man, I'm not doing it. I was like, I'm not going to do it. And I was almost like, yeah, well, it's done. I'm not going to do it by myself. I'm not going to do anything. And then the fact that you're afraid of it means you need to do it.
Yeah.
So you need to fucking do it. And I fucking drank some tea because I don't drink coffee. I got some black tea. Dude, 15 minutes before, I'm like hyperventilating and shit. And I'm just like, fuck. I got up away from my computer. I laid down on my bed and I'm just like, what? Why am I doing this right now? And I sat in front of that computer and I did it. And I remember afterwards, I literally felt like I fought.
Wow.
Like I was, my armpits were sweaty. I was like, emotionally, I literally felt like I had just fought. But I was also the most happy in that moment because I was like, yes, I feel like shit right now, but also I just did something that I didn't want to do and it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be.
Wow.
Almost everything that I've done with tangible risk versus reward. And I've taken that chance. Even if I didn't get what I wanted immediately, it always turned out for the better, you know? So I like that you said that. And I like that it's something that has consistently come up in this conversation because I don't think people think about that enough.
Yeah.
That so many of the things that we want in life, we're afraid of it.
Yeah.
Like there's people that are working like 9-to-5 jobs that have so many ideas about things they could do, you know, whether it's like real estate or YouTube or starting a business of something that they actually enjoy, and they don't do it simply because they're afraid to give up that, what they think is security and consistency in having a job and somebody paying you money, you know?
Yeah, something my mom always tells me when I express things, you know, that are tough is she says, nothing worth having comes easy.
Mm-hmm. And
that's always been something that has stuck with me. I can't think of anything that I want that I could just get like that. You know, like you have to go through the fire if you want something that really truly does mean something to you. And I think it's super cool that outside of fighting, you've found something that makes you feel all those things. Because I think that's part of the reason why we fight, is like we like that confrontation of that thing that scares you and overcoming it.
Yes.
So that's definitely inspirational, you know, for me to sort of try to find something other than fighting that can challenge me in that way. I think when you're in it so deep, it's hard to believe that there's something else out there that can do that for you.
Yeah.
So that's really cool that you found that.
And I think too, what a lot of people end up getting locked into fighting with is because they've done damn near the hardest thing you could do with confronting something you're afraid of. It's almost like, yeah, I've done this and now I want to stay with this. And it's hard for them to like remove that connection to fighting and like making it their sole identity and then trying to do something else. And that I learned from Dominic Cruz. Because he talked about it. I was actually training at Alliance MMA when he tore his MCL or ACL, I think it was, for the second time. And then they like took his belt and had the whole thing. And he would still come to the gym every day. And I remember he talked at a press conference after he beat his comeback fight was TJ, right? When he came back and won the belt?
I think so.
And so he came back, he won the belt, and then I remember him saying like,
I love being the champion of the world. I love being the best on earth, but I don't need it to be happy, and that actually releases me and keeps me free. I can still be happy in defeat. That's a freedom. I can't say that I've always had that, but I still feel free. I still feel at peace. I'm still happy. I'm still happy that God gave me this platform to be able to challenge myself as a man and evolve as a man and become a better man. Regardless of what anybody says about prize fighters, every single one of these fights is a life lesson if you look at it and view it right and if you use it correctly. And I use this 8-10 weeks of camp and this challenge in front of the media and saying what you're going to say and backing it up and taking your loss and defeat and all this to grow as a human being. That's why we're here. We're not here just to be the best at everything. We're here to kind of be attached to everything but nothing at the same time. It sucks to lose. It's the worst feeling in the world. It's not what I survive off of, is being the title holder. I'm a very happy individual outside of that, and for that I'm thankful.
That always stuck with me. I know that in this exact moment when I'm training or when I'm, you know, at the fight, I am a fighter. But once I leave that, that's not who I am. That's not my identity, you know? And I think for a lot of fighters, it's hard for them to like walk away from that or separate themselves from fighting. And they end up fighting too long or, you know, just not being in a good place once they leave because they can't do it anymore.
I can imagine too for like the greats, like people that are extremely well known as fighters. Yeah. You know, to be, at least from an outside perspective, to be viewed as that for the rest of your life, like that's also really tough. Yeah. Can't imagine what that's like.
I mean, we are in a lot of ways our biggest accomplishments, right? Especially if you're in the public eye. So if you're somebody like a professional athlete, I mean, I'm sure football players get it too. Yeah. If you're an all-star football player, for the rest of your life, no matter what you do, you can have all kinds of businesses and be doing other things, but unless you make a name for yourself just as big, doing something else, you're always going to be the football player. You're always going to be the superstar football player. It's never going to be anything else. Unless people get to know you on a personal level, then you become you, right? And I'm sure you've probably had these experiences too, where you go out, maybe you're, you know, at a bar or a party or something, and people ask you what you do. I never tell them I'm a fighter.
Well, you can.
What do you mean?
Because your ears aren't that bad.
That's true.
You can.
That's true.
You can.
I mean, you could just be like, oh, I used to wrestle in high school or something.
Yeah. You want to hear something messed up that I do?
What's that?
Like, depending on how someone approaches me, like if they're like very rude about it, I'll just say it's a birth defect. Like I was born with it.
Just make them feel bad instantly.
It's messed up, but like if you're gonna come at me with like in not like a respectful manner, because I guess it's like how I would go up to someone, you know, if I like idolize someone in a certain way, like I would be respectful about it. Some people are not always respectful.
So what are some of the like disrespectful ways that someone has come up to you?
Just like oh, do you fight, bro? Like, I train. I don't want to like relate to you right now based off of that.
It's not even relating. That's that's a dick measuring contest what they're trying to get into.
I'm not measuring right now.
Yeah.
Like, not right now. You know, like, so that for me can get kind of tough, but you just got to own it.
Yeah.
You know, it's just hard to own it all the time. But yeah, sometimes like if someone doesn't know,
Yeah.
like I'll try to play out as long as I can before it's like
if they haven't noticed, if
Yeah.
they didn't notice the ear, yeah.
or if I wear a beanie or hoodie.
Yeah.
I've actually like if I go to the grocery store, I almost always just put a hoodie over my ears, like just over my head, just so I can like be incognito.
It's so interesting you said that. So I went to the grocery store yesterday. I try not to wear my hood up if I'm just like living everyday life.
Yeah.
If I'm like coming from training or something like that and I'm all bummy, yeah, whatever. I'm gonna put the hood on.
Yeah.
But yesterday, I don't know. I just didn't want to be perceived by anyone.
Yeah.
And I'm at the grocery store. I'm at Trader Joe's in fucking Marina Del Rey, and it's like
Trader Joe's, bro. Trader Joe's, bro. You're checking out. You're like, bro.
Yes. And so the entire time I was in the store, it's the first I go to that Trader Joe's all the fucking time.
Yeah.
The entire time I was in there, everybody's looking at me because I don't know if it's because I have my hood on.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but everybody's staring at me. Like I'm walking through the aisles and there's just like people just like looking. I get to the register and the girl's being all fucking weird. Like usually they always talk to me when I'm up there and I have small talk. This fucking girl didn't say shit. I was like, what the fuck is going on in here?
Yeah, that's very unlike Trader Joe's.
It's like the Chick-fil-A of grocery stores.
Yeah.
They're all super nice and shit. And it was like, oh, hi, how's your day going? Yeah. My pleasure for everything. Yeah. Random story, but yeah, that was a very interesting thing that happened to me yesterday.
Like you wanna not be noticed for once, and then everybody like, notices you.
So kind of going back into to martial arts. For a while now, I've been seeing like you're traveling overseas to Europe, and then you're back here. I know your girlfriend lives in Denmark.
Yeah.
But you're also training while you're over there. So how is that dynamic, like preparing for fights and just training in general, going back and forth?
It's been like a total blessing. The fact that, you know, it just so happens like where my girlfriend works and lives, like I'm able to find such great training. So when I'm out there, I train with my striking coach. His name's Jan. He holds pads for me. And
is that the guy? His name is like Filipino.
Yeah, Filipino Flash.
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool. Him and I have a really good relationship where it's not like master student. It's just student.
Yeah.
So
you learn from him, he learns from you.
Yeah. And we, you know, if we see something cool, you know, in the UFC fights, like we'll send it to each other on Instagram. We're like, all right, we're working on this tomorrow. So working with him has really helped me like be super creative in my striking. So shout out to him. And then I train at an MMA team there called Arte Swab. Okay. So they have a lot of like really solid welterweights there, and a really good jiu-jitsu system and some great coaches as well. So being able to like go there and train in like a completely different environment and a completely different like ebb and flow of life as well.
The culture is very different here, I'm sure.
Yeah, super different. And it's helped me mature as a person too. Just being exposed to different things. So having like the contrast training at CMMA with Chad and with all the athletes that we have there and being able to have like two pools of like solid people to learn from has been really cool. And to be able to go back and forth it's been great all around. You know, because as a fighter, typically like you stay loyal to one gym.
Yeah, you stay
know?
where you're at.
But the fact that like, you know, my girlfriend's out there, it kind of gives me a little pass to like go and like train at a completely different gym and it's like chill. I'm actually going back this week, so I'm excited to switch it up and train with some of the guys out there as well.
How would you say that the culture is different from LA and the United States versus Europe, Denmark?
Yeah, I mean, it's different in a lot of ways, but the most apparent is probably just how the lifestyle of living in a city like that, like here, it's like you have to get in your car to go anywhere. Yeah. You know, whereas there, everybody walks or bikes everywhere. It's a biking city.
Okay.
So I'm like biking to trainings, and a lot of times I'm there when it's like snowing and hailing. So
and
I'll be like
still riding in the bikes in the snow.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah, or they take the metro, but I'll just like rough it out and bike to training.
Yeah.
And so there's also that like element. It makes you a little bit tough. You know, you're not just cozy in your car. But yeah, I would say like the transportation, you know, like just going from point A to point B, like, you know, there's more of a culture of like stopping at a coffee shop, you know, seeing some friends. Whereas here, I feel like you kind of get stuck in like your pattern of like work home, work home, work home.
Yeah.
So I definitely like that when I'm there, I'm able to branch out in different ways and keep my mind a little more diversified in what I do.
Yeah.
For me personally, like out of camp, the pastries there. The pastries
sure it's
are
good.
unreal. Danish
Yeah.
pastries are unreal.
Wow.
So like every Sunday, I'll go to my favorite bakery, Juno, and I'll have my favorite cardamom croissant. I'll have one of those, and it's different in the best ways possible for me. So if you know there's a way that you can travel and also train, like I recommend that to everybody.
Yeah. It kind of sounds like East Coast living. People are not as nice, but
Yeah.
I can imagine that it's very similar. I would say I hate the whole being cold and still having to like get on the train and do all that shit because it fucking sucks. But I did enjoy the fact that, you know, if you are taking public transportation, even if you're not taking public transportation, a lot of the different pockets in DC, it's walkable still.
Yeah.
So like even if I drive from, you know, my house to the gym, when I get to the gym, there's still so like I can walk around and get stuff. So like after training, we can walk down the street. There's like all kinds of shops and stuff like that. So it's very similar. I didn't really understand it growing up in DC, why everybody was like, oh, you know, I want to live in a walkable area. I want to live in a walk. And then I move here and I'm like, oh yeah, I get it now. Because I lived in it. I kind of took it for granted. I didn't really understand it.
Yeah.
And then when I was living in San Diego, I kind of had that. You know, I was living in North Park and
San
it's
Diego's
like
that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Like if you live in a good area, like you can walk around and there's different stuff all around. Like, dude, North Park I love North Park. I don't know if you've been up here in LA.
Yeah, especially where we
It's not
train.
like that.
It's
Yeah.
like warehouse
It's
district.
shitty.
It's like 7-Eleven, maybe.
Yeah. I definitely appreciate it more now that I've left that. But it's good that you found that over there and it gives you that feeling.
No, definitely. It also makes me appreciate, you know, what we have here. You know, like there's definitely so many things that we take for granted when we're just in the same place.
Yeah.
So it's good both ways.
For sure.
You know, I love LA.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. If you lived in LA your whole life, pretty much.
Yeah.
Out of any of the places, I'm sure you've traveled a lot. You talked about traveling when you were a kid to different competitions and stuff. And we're excluding Denmark because I don't want you to use that one. But is there a place two different places? One that you enjoy simply because you enjoy it as a human being, and then another place that you enjoy because of the training.
So I can't say that I've trained in too many places other than Denmark and LA. But I would say the one time where I did train somewhere was at with Faraz.
In Canada? Okay.
Yeah. So I went to Canada and I trained with Faraz for like a week, and that was a super cool experience. He's a great coach.
Yeah.
You know, hopefully one day I can work with him again.
Yeah.
But in terms of a place where I can just like be was probably the summer. I had like one of the craziest summers ever just traveling, which it just kind of ended up working out that way. But my girlfriend's mom lives in Spain.
Okay.
So it's her house is like very secluded. It's in this very small town, very secluded from like it feels like civilization. And it was kind of the first time where I could just like be, you know, and just, you know, not feel like I have to go wake up and like run a marathon or just like wake up and, you know, just take life as it is and how it comes. So that's probably so far my favorite like destination in terms of like being able to just take everything in.
And last question before we get out of here. Obviously, we've been talking about fighting. We're fighters. You recently fought for the LFA title. That didn't go your way. But what is next for you?
What's next for me is fight in October. That's my next goal is to get back in there. Yeah, for LFA.
What is it that you want when your career is over for people to say about you? What do you want people to think about you when you're done?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think my answer right now is that I gave it my all and didn't cut any corners. And that when I step in there, that there's no quit in me and I leave it all inside that cage, regardless of the outcome, because it's what I love to do. So I hope that, you know, by the time, I think as time goes on, you know, what you think changes. But in this present moment, I think what I would want is for people to just see my dedication and see my passion for fighting when I'm done with it.
Wow. I love that answer. I do. All right, guys. Very insightful podcast here with Jean-Paul. I'm glad we finally got to do this. We've been talking about it for a little bit.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. How can anybody get in touch with you if they wanted to follow?
Just my Instagram is my name, Jean-Paul MMA, and that's pretty much my main social media source. Hopefully get something on the books in October for LFA, so look out for me there, and that's pretty much it.
All right. All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching the podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. We will see you next time. Peace.